be intentional. When you have something, you got to be intentional about that. Secondly is, I would say, look big picture, look long term. It's the steps you take now need to be leading somewhere. So it's always better to look out to where you want to go. So have a vision or a plan for where you're wanting to go. And then third, hug your kids and your wife daily. They're the ones that matter the most on your practical stuff, and never lose the core family in the process. It's your wife, it's your husband, it's your kids. Those are the ones that matter the most. When you go to bed at night, or even better, when you die, they're the ones who are going to miss you and be talking about you.
This is the Fit Investor Podcast, where we talk about how to live a more holistic life of being fit, not only financially, but physically and faithfully. We'll be joined by experts in all these areas to share their experiences and actionable and practical tips so that you can be a fit investor too. So now let's join our hosts, Cale Delaney, Wesley Whitehead, and Brenna Carls.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Fit Investor. I am your host, Cale Delaney, here with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Wesley Whitehead.
Morning.
And today we have a special guest, Mr. Patrick Lengel. And Patrick is a 46-year-old husband and father, active in ministry for almost 28 years. He and his wife actually met in seminary, with Hebrew being their love language. So we'll have to touch on that a little bit. They have 4 kids, 21, 19, 17, and 14. He's pastored churches, been involved in multiple church plants on various roles within the church, like children's minister, youth leader, mission and evangelism coordinator. And currently he's an elder at his church, Grace Bible in Moore, South Carolina, where he also leads adult discipleship, men's ministry, and is on the safety team. He's been active in other ministries as well, like helping to start a network of biker churches, prison ministries, a chaplain for a coroner's office, served 10 years as chaplain for a law enforcement motorcycle club, and helps lead various workplace ministry opportunities. Throughout all of this, he runs a family-owned training company where he is working to help his mother retire this fall. He does personal and professional coaching and will soon be getting his general contracting license to build short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Through his time ministering and working, he's developed a framework for living that organizes and prioritizes life into 6 categories: faith, family, fellowship, finances, fitness, and footprints. Patrick, welcome, number one.
Thank you.
Either we stole it from you or you stole it from us, but somehow those 6 categories take the 3 from our podcast here. So what's going on with that, Patrick? Come on.
They do. Let's just say I've been doing it for about 15 years. So you guys are still wee little boys at that point.
That's true.
I think the bigger answer may be, when God is working, he works amongst different people in different ways. And so rarely is anything ever new. And so it's just, I think we're tapping into some very similar truths in the journeys we're taking.
Yeah, the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, right?
Like, hey, we've got 3 of us right here.
Yeah.
So,
There we go. Good answer. I like it. So take us back. So obviously we got a lot of similarities in what we're doing. So take us back a little bit, how you got into ministry in the first place, I guess, maybe your Christian journey, and then we can take it from there.
Thank you. So I did not grow up in a Christian family. I found it not even really by searching. My first missionary experience was my neighbor when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. We just moved to a new town, and this kid across the street, who's a few years older than me, came over, kicking at the ground, knocked on our door, and said, "My mom's making me invite you to church tonight." This was our fall festival, Halloween carnival type thing at church. I went and kept going. And then when I was about 12 years old, I realized my need for a savior, and Jesus radically and greatly changed my heart and my life and saved me that day, which is a fun story in and of itself. But over that time, the next 6 years or so, going through middle school and high school, started teaching and started learning the Bible and just reading it and going through it. But when I got to college, I had a little decision point I had to make. I had a full Air Force ROTC scholarship up at Clemson University. And so I took that and started going there because ever since I was like 4 years old, I wanted to fly the F-16 and Top Gun with the F-18s, or the F-14s were really just inspirational for me. And my brother was already in the Air Force or getting ready to go become a pilot. And so I started with the Air Force ROTC and did really well there for 3 semesters. But then the Christmas break of my sophomore year, I was driving home from Virginia from my grandmother's house. And it was almost like God was saying, all right, you're achieving your dreams, your goals, but I have something different for you. You need to make a choice. And literally weeping as I was driving over the mountains, coming back from Virginia to North Carolina, weeping as I was driving, and there was no decision to make. I went back to Clemson, told my colonel that I'm turning down the rest of my scholarship, and changed schools and started focusing on ministry stuff at that point. So I ended up graduating from the University of South Carolina with a double major of business management and marketing, because I knew business was always something I wanted to do too. And from there, started working in churches through college and went to seminary afterwards. And kind of story unpacks after that.
Wow.
Interesting. So I'm kind of curious. So you made this pretty drastic change, and I'm sure there's more to the story than that quick little snippet there.
It
But
is.
how did you know that it was God's calling?
I had a good inkling of it even through high school, that I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed, even then, before coaching was even a thing, I coached a lot of my peers and was active in discipleship and church and ministry and missions efforts. How do you know if it's God's will? That's a great question. Oftentimes, it's a gut feeling. Oftentimes, it's when you're looking at God's word and you're spending time with him in prayer, and you're just realizing that internal angst that's happening, that there's another tug happening in you. And that's kind of what it was. It was kind of a reminder that, hey, remember back then I was showing you the impact I wanted you to make in missions or ministry. You're not on that path right now. And so I think God gives us opportunities to choose the path we're taking. He has the ideal path for us, which usually is the right path if it's his path, but it's not always easy to know and figure out. Sometimes you don't even know until you look backwards. Hindsight's oftentimes a good determination of what God's been doing and what his will is, but it's not always an easy thing in the moment.
That's a point. And real quick, Kale, just a comment on that. That's a really cool story. And your question about how do you know it's God's will, that's something that even I've struggled with. And one of the things that I tell my kids, because they ask this question too, is that if you don't ever talk to your dad, which is me, then you won't be able to pick my voice out of a crowd. You just won't be able to. But if you talk to me on a regular basis, you hear my voice, then you could be in a room with like 50 people and I can just say your name, you'll hear it. And a lot of times people, they're always sitting around waiting for God to talk to them, but they won't crack open the book. And so if you're not familiar with what God says, you won't be able to pick up on the cues when he's leading you somewhere. And so I always tell my kids, be as familiar as you possibly can with the Bible so that you can pick up those in your gut feelings when God's like, say, hey, don't go down that road. Hey, don't take that flight. Don't do this. But like you were saying, Patrick, a lot of times we don't really know it's God's will until after it's happened. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. I like to, because Wesley, we talking about just hearing his voice. Jesus said that the sheep will know my voice. And I just remember growing up, my kids were all young. Most kids are running around, they're crazy. So we'll be at church and all the kids in the churches are running around playing. And the thing that we used to do, coming from a military family myself, the front and center aspect of the call. So I would just yell, Lengels, center. And just wherever they were in the church, you all just see kids, my four specifically, in line right there. And it was just like, they heard it, they knew it, and it was time to respond. It would be great if we did that to God. We listen to him that sometimes.
Yeah.
I need you to come to my house and train my kids for me.
Kids and dogs, those are the things that takes that long time to train them.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I wanted to dive into that a little bit because just like you said, Wes, that's something you struggle with. I think it's something every Christian struggles with at some point in their life. And I think, unfortunately, most Christians miss a lot of opportunities because of whether it's, like you said, Wes, we don't familiarize ourselves enough with the word to hear and understand that it is God's voice calling us, or frankly, we have a rebellious nature. I can think of a few instances, and one in particular where I'm quite certain it was God's calling for something for me, and I did not listen. I went my way. And I just think about it was many years ago, and I just think about what the avenue or path of my life would have been had I followed that calling. So that's why I want to dig into it to understand a little bit more. How did you discern it? And also, did you have doubts along the way, or was there a process, or was it literally, okay, I understand this is God's calling tomorrow. Hey, I'm changing my school, all this stuff. Kind of what was the process?
Yeah. So in that particular case, once I figured it out, there was no other choice to make. It was like, all right, I'm going to go up there and have the hard conversation with our colonel and turn down the rest of the scholarship. because I was actually doing really good in ROTC. My freshman year, I was named the cadet of the detachment, even as a freshman, and it was just a lot of really good things happening. I get really focused and can get maybe sometimes overly focused on things when I'm trying to achieve it. But yeah, but it's the struggle though. Sometimes is, yeah, you feel the rebellious heart. Sometimes it's not knowing God's will. Sometimes it's, listen, with all the stuff going on, I don't know if I am ready to do that. I have families to feed. I have all these other things. I think that's why Paul talks about, if you're single, it's best to stay single because you'll be freeing yourself up to serve God in different ways. The times that I've had to make decisions like, oh, okay, we're struggling with eating because the path I chose wasn't a financially good path. It wasn't like I'm sitting here watching my brother, who was an Air Force pilot, making really good money doing that. And I'm sitting here literally for over half of our marriage, living below the poverty line, but loving the impact I'm making, being able to stay home with my family, be readily available for them, helping to watch them grow and lead them as they're growing. And sometimes it's, man, a different path would have been financially a lot better. But I look at my kids now, and Kel, you've met my son. I couldn't ask for 4 better kids. And it's not because I was home. There's a bigger thing that God was working out, but all of those parts matter. And even if we mess up or we choose the wrong thing at one point, the reality is God is still working. And we can think back, oh man, I didn't take that road there. But God is still using us and utilizing us, and he's directing us. And one bad choice doesn't eliminate us from the will of God. It just shows God's sovereignty even more, because even in our boneheadedness, he's still working it out perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that. And it's just another example of this. And I don't want to belabor this too much, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. I saw yesterday the Sound of Freedom movie. Wes, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a newer movie, Jim Caviezel, and about human trafficking. And there's Christian undertones in the movie and everything, which is great. But one of the culminations, or I don't know. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that because I can't think of the right thing to say. But is when, without spoiling too much, is that he accomplishes something in saving this one child, but then to save another one, he has to make a big decision, and it's going to require him to leave a very good job that he has a pension almost coming due for him, and put his life on the line, away from his family and all this stuff. And thankfully he chooses the right path. But when I was watching that movie, I was like, wow, would I do that? Gosh, I don't know.
You know what? You missing that, Kale. Something you said, Patrick. So you said you basically gave up a lot of income, a lot of potential income to do what you do, right? But I think people forget, in our podcast, we have a lot of successful business people on here, and I'm not disparaging any of our former guests, but they're very much, you can tell that a lot of them, not all, a lot of them judge their success in life by their bank account, right? And the irony is, the example you gave, Kale, in the movie, and of course, Patrick, your life is an example of this, is that 100 years from now, whatever you have in your account is nothing. But what you've stored up in heaven is going to be for eternity. And a lot of times, even me, I have a hard time at this. I have a hard time being like, okay, Lord, what's on this earth is real wealth, and that's just ethereal, spiritual wealth. And it's, wait a second, who is the one who created gold, silver, diamonds? Who is the one who created beauty and pleasure and the taste of an apple or a peach or a plum? The one who created that, it says, trust me, there is more for you if you store up righteousness on this side of the fence. Again, go back to my kids. I'm always about analogies. It's like my kids going to the beach, and they can spend their entire day at the beach making this massive, elaborate castle. And I'm like, son, enjoy the ocean. That's going to be gone tomorrow. And in his mind, it's got to be the best castle. Then he goes in the hotel, the next morning, it's gone. And it's a lot of times we spend so much time in the business community too on building our bank accounts, which nothing wrong with, if that's God's calling in your life, fine. But that shouldn't be your measure of success, your primary measure of success, because the moment you pass, it's over. And like Solomon says, like, it's a great evil under the sun to store up all this wealth and then someone else gets to use it. And that's true for everybody. You look at like the Walmart, like Sam Walton, the guy, good guy, made billions of dollars. He's long gone. His grandkids now are some of the most debauched people you've ever met, living off of granddad's money. And what good was that? Nothing. So anyways.
Yeah, Proverbs says the wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And we always think about money, and that's a good thing, but character is a far better inheritance you leave to your kid. And we're working with setting up our living trust and some of our businesses. We're putting in that. So that way there will be resources for the generations to come, but we're also trying to set it up wisely so it's just not handed to people in the future, that there is available, but this character and integrity and all of those things are what really matters as we talk about living. But like Matthew 6, you just talking about, Wesley, Jesus says, and I think verse 21 is to lay up your treasures in heaven, because where your treasures are, there your heart will be also. It doesn't say you put your treasures where your heart is. It says your heart will chase after your treasures.
Yeah.
And so we just want to make sure everything's in balance. And I think even looking through Old Testament and New Testament, there is good blessings that's available, and God wants to bless his children and his people. And that is a financial blessing as well. I don't think taking a vow of poverty is a good or even a biblical thing necessarily. I think Paul says in Timothy that the laborer is worth twice is worth its weight, and that your elder should be paid twice what they're, what's good. And so those things are good for us as long as it's in the right order and focused properly, I think. So
and how they're used, how they're stewarded.
Absolutely. That's why you talk about your kids at the beach, Wesley. On my 6 F's, the footprints is your legacy, your impact. I remember I thought through the F as I was actually on the beach, and looking back, you can see where I've been because of my footprints. I might see in the future, when I'm gone, my kids and grandkids and people I know will know where I've been because of the footprints I left. Same thing for all of us. So when I say footprints, it means your legacy, your impact, the influences you've had in life.
Nice. So what is the legacy that you want to leave?
Before we had kids, my wife and I were sitting down, was like, okay, what's the purpose of having kids? What's our goal? And a lot of people don't do that for parenting. And when we decided, even before we got pregnant the first time, that our legacy for being a parent was we wanted to raise little disciples of Christ who grow up to love Jesus. If you look at my LinkedIn account, my little hashtag and what my thing is, it's making those around me better. So as I just think through my daily living, I like to see people have aha moments. I like them to be their best. I'm always willing to be in the shadows if someone else can take the spotlight and if it fits where they are. So just my daily motivation is, I actually have a saying that says, making people that matter, helping people that matter lead lives that matter. And the person that matters is that person who's right there in front of me. Whoever that is at any given day, whoever God brings it in front of my path. Ultimately, I want them to see Christ. But I'm working with a handful of guys right now who are older. I think almost all of them are older than me, but are ready to, okay, I need to do a little career change. I'm not ready to retire. How do I do this? How do I get a side hustle started? So I spend a lot of time even helping and coaching and guiding guys through that. So it looks differently for people as we are talking about what's needed for them in the moment. But I just love people and watching them have those aha moments in life, whether it's in fitness or finances or family. We do a group of our guys from church. We just met last night on Thursday, and we just sit down. We spend a couple hours each time we meet together, just talking about fatherhood issues and being a husband, and sharing the fears we have, or the pains we have, the struggles we have. And those are the things that just excite me in doing that. I love working. I love having these other jobs and stuff. But the reality is my passion is people and helping them get to where they want to go and ultimately get them to Christ.
I love that. How do you instill that into your children?
I don't know, Jenny. It's happened. It's happened. I think sometimes it's caught more than it's taught.
Right.
When they see it being lived out in the home, outside the home, I think that's kind of what Deuteronomy 6 talks about, is teaching these things when you wake up, when you go down on your fence, on your doorpost. But the reality is, I know some wonderful men and women of God whose kids struggle, and I don't know why that is. Obviously, there's hard issues involved. We've been blessed with our kids. I have 4 wonderful ones that I literally couldn't have asked for better. And yeah, we put in a lot of hard work, a lot of sweat and tears and blood sometimes too. There's a lot of consistency that we had to work through with this discipline and training and instructing and all of that. But that's not a guarantee for everything coming out perfect. So I don't know if there's a perfect answer to how do you instill it. You be diligent and be intentional and pray a lot, pray a lot. Because one of the things I always keep in mind, I try to share with other parents, is that God loves your kids far more than you ever will love your kids. And he has a better plan for them than you have. There is no question about that. We get prodigal sons and prodigal daughters all the time. We're prodigal sons and prodigal daughters all the time as well. And just literally by the grace of God that I'm got the kids that I have, thankfully.
Yeah. No, I think just like in anything, and like you said, the consistency and intentionality, and that will make actions speak louder than words, right? So yeah, if you live it out well in your life, then they inevitably will pick up on that to some degree.
And I don't think it's like necessarily a formula for this. I think it's basically you have to do something towards educating your children unto the Lord and putting in them a fear of God and a respect for the word and letting them see you pray, see you read the Bible. And then, like Jesus says, trust God for the harvest. Like you throw the seed out. And I think sometimes parents make the mistake of they'll outsource all the discipleship to Sunday school or church or the Christian school they go to. And the kids never see the parents do anything biblical. And then they wonder why the kids fall away. If your son sees dad praying on his knees, asking the Lord for something or thanking him for something, it's a huge impact because for a kid, your dad's like everything. Your dad's like the hero. And then you see your dad basically humbly going before this invisible being. It makes you be like, whoa, who's dad leaning on? What's up with that? I think that's also key. And too many times, at least in my experience in the past, too many families, it's the woman who goes to church with the kids and the dad's basically watching football or golfing. And then once the kids reach teenage years, they're like, I'm gonna do what dad's doing. This is boring.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. It reminds me was it Rodney Atkins, country singer, who has a song "Watching You." The little kid learns to cuss by watching his dad. He learns to pray by watching his dad, and so one of those heartfelt, make you start crying as a father songs. Yep. Yeah. And what else? One of the things you said too about it's not just outsourcing it to your church. What I call my ministry is called Living Between the Sundays, and it's basically what do you do the other 166 hours when you're not in church? Those 2 hours of Sunday school and worship. It's the other 166 hours that really matter. Is how you live between those Sundays that really shows the world, shows your kids what's valuable to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And just one thing I'll share, and not that. So I make it a point that we pray at every meal, and it's, to be honest, like some of it's accountability for me to make sure that I am praying because I need to do it more than I should or than I do. So part of it's that, and part of it's because I want the kids to see that. I want that to become a habit that they do. And so our youngest is 3 years old, or 3.5 now. And so he just recently, I think over the last like 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, he starts and he wants to do it on his own. So like when we have a meal and you say, hey, it's time to pray, like he jumps in and he does his little prayer, and it's gibberish, and it's like he's talking about like chocolate and lizards and anything that he can think of that happened throughout his day. But it's like the cutest little thing and like the most innocent prayer, honestly. And like to me, it's convicting actually, because I'm like, man, like his prayer is probably more heartfelt and powerful than mine. And he's 3 years old. And I'm like, goodness gracious. Is it, like I said, it's very convicting for me, but I'm happy that he's getting at least that understanding and that habit, and understanding that this is something that's important. So I don't know, it's funny. It just started happening, and it's a cool thing. It's a very cool thing.
Yeah. Sometimes you need the reminder because, like Jesus talks about how basically, unless you become like a child in the kingdom of God. And it's so true, because like my kids, like you tell them something and they believe me, they don't doubt it. And yet I'll read something in God's word and I'm like, really? Is that really going to happen? I don't know. And wow, that's so sad. Like, being a kid really is a great analogy for being a believer.
Yeah. Having that lack of doubt, or that confidence,
You've not been jaded yet.
There you go.
I just remember when my kids were younger, when we were at the swimming pool or whatever else, and it's, Dad, catch me, and just dives into the pool at me. It's like, there's no doubt, no fear, Dad was going to catch him. And if we can take that and translate that over to how we live out our faith with the true God and the one and Father who will never leave us nor forsake us, man, if we can have that much confidence and faith and trust in him, and to just boldly jump into
Yeah.
the deep end of life, it would be amazing.
Especially when he calls you to jump. That's the thing. Like sometimes my kids jump, I'm not even looking. I'm like, let me look first. But if God's like saying jump, okay, now definitely going to catch me.
Yeah. How true is that though? How quickly, and just going along with how quickly that fear comes into our lives though. It's amazing. Again, just thinking with my youngest, the 3-year-old, when he was very young, when he was really honestly within like a couple weeks of him being born, I was taking him out to the beach and the ocean, and he loved the water. As a little baby, he loved the water. And then when he got to about like 2 years old or so, he was terrified of it. Like he didn't want to step foot in the water anymore. We'd go to the beach and he would like, you try to get him to dip his toes in the water and he'd scream. And it was the weirdest thing. And now he's starting to, he still won't go in the ocean water. He'll go in a pool maybe, but in the ocean water, he'll dip his toes in now though. And it's just a weird thing. I keep trying to think about it. Like, where did that come from? Like, where did that fear all of a sudden come from? And it's with other things too. Like you talk about jumping and off of things. Like, yeah, he used to jump off the edge of the pool without hesitation. Now he won't. He sits there and he puts his arm out, Daddy, pick me up. I don't know. It's an interesting analogy, but I think that it goes through all these things, like how quickly those fears and doubts and all these things come into our life. And like you said, Wes, jade us and our opinions and how that filter now that we see our lives through, that cynicism or skepticism, perhaps that we even apply to God's word and everything.
There's a little bit of self-preservation in the midst of that too, which affects us even as we make decisions as we get older. It's like, how will this affect the other aspects? And is this worth stepping out on? Is this worth investing in this? Because I don't know how it's going to work, and will it come back to bite me? And so, yeah, there's a lot of that self-preservation aspect that might play part of it as well.
Yeah. If we can, let's talk a little bit about the various ministries. Like, I'm curious about the biker ministries and stuff like that, just because like my father, he, for several years, he was part of a motorcycle ministry with his church called Cornerstone Ministry up in New England. And I always thought it was a cool thing. And I like bikes and stuff like that too. But it was a bunch of these big burly Harley guys, big bellies, big beards. Yep. But they all come together. They're all serving Christ. And I think there's something inspiring a little bit when you see somebody who looks big and powerful submit. And so I always thought that was a powerful ministry because of that. So I'm not sure what the biker ministry is, that if that's something similar or what.
Yeah, it started. So we on this one is my dad and I. My dad got saved when I was a youth minister in college. He was a special ops guy in the Army and the Marines. He served both sides. But we got just plugged in. We were riding motorcycles a little bit, and we got plugged in to a biker ministry that was at Myrtle Beach, doing witnessing, paying for people's gas at a gas station for the bikers, and then sharing the gospel with them. And we were doing a report was being done about how many people gave their life to Christ over that week at Myrtle Beach, and those hundreds that people that came to faith. I'm gonna say supposedly, because follow-up is always fun. But my dad actually asked a question to the group: is what's happening to them now? They're going back all around the eastern part of the United States. What's follow-up? What discipleship is being done? And that kind of got all of us sitting there going, don't really know. So we started that day what we call Biker Bible Institute. And the idea was 10,000 bikers in the Bible every week. That's the big goal for that. Now, I've been out of the network now for about 10, 12 years. But as that was going, and so we were just focusing on putting out Bible studies so people can get together. Back way before Zoom, we were doing Adobe Connect things on Tuesday night, and we would have 20, 30 people from all throughout the US and Europe coming in, and we would just do Bible studies and discipleship talks. But as guys started getting together, because a lot of these guys, as you were just describing them, may not be welcome in a lot of our standard churches. They'd be like, "Ooh, you're different," type of thing. So these guys started getting together and doing Bible studies and started connecting with us. And okay, what's next? We're got like 30 guys together on a regular basis. And so churches started popping up. And so a number of churches started springing up throughout the network, as far as Canada, up north, all the way down through Alabama and Texas, and maybe Louisiana. It may not be Louisiana. But yeah, and it just happened naturally. After seminary, my wife and I did church planting, and we worked for a few years, knocking on doors, doing all the hard work, got 20, 30 people together. But when we started getting the bikers together, doing Bible studies, it was like churches just started springing up. And it was like, God, you're doing something, and we're just pretty much staying out the way of it. A lot of time, I think we try to programatize things too much, or we try to plan it out too much. And this one, we were very intentional. Let's just get out the way. We're going to encourage people to get in the Bible. We'll offer them studies that they can do together, but we tried not to organize it too much from our side. And just the Holy Spirit just started running through just all these groups. And it was just really cool. So you still have Biker Bible Institute going on. You still got a number of biker churches. A lot of these biker churches have now joined with cowboy churches as well. And so you have, that's a weird and unique combination. It's the metal stallion and the horse stallion.
Right.
But a lot of the biker churches have joined the cowboy churches and still do a lot. Because a lot of the biker ministries like Christian Motorcycle Association and some of these other ones are really good at evangelizing. But discipling isn't the strong point. And so it was just focusing on discipling is what happened with that. And it was beyond anything we tried to do or tried to control at that point.
Interesting. Yeah. It just made me think about, I'm reading a book right now it's called Hearts of Fire. It's a book from the Voice of the Martyrs, but it's stories of various women who have undergone severe persecution in various places around the world. Incredibly inspiring read. But the theme I haven't finished it yet, but the theme throughout all the stories I've read, and there's terrible sufferings and persecutions that they go through, which is amazing, but they keep their faith, and they, like you said, these individuals' focus has been on getting out of the way and taking whatever situation they're in to simply speak the word of Christ. And whenever they did that, it was amazing how rapidly it spread.
Yeah.
No matter if they were in a prison camp, a slave labor camp, or being tortured in some various prison, it's just amazing the results and what God's able to do when you're simply faithful, and of course in this situation it's despite severe suffering and persecution, but getting out of the way and simply spreading the word of the gospel and letting God water that and grow it, instead of us trying to be, I think oftentimes we try to be not only the planter, but also the sower and also the reaper. And we want to be everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just reminded me of that when you were talking about that.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's best for us to be faithful, but also to get out the way and let God work.
Yeah. Yeah. Great read. I want to put that out there. Everybody, you should read it. Hearts of Fire. Really excellent read. Let's talk about your current ministry as a pastor. And how long have you been a pastor now?
Okay, so I'm not on staff at a church, so
Okay.
I do bivocational stuff, but I am an elder at our church now.
Okay, that's right.
And it seems like no matter, even if I try to go in as a lay person when we move or go to a different area, I always try to be teaching and stuff. Been an elder here at this church now for almost 2 years, just shy of 2 years, I think, at this point. So I preach on a regular basis. I'm preaching this Sunday, John 15, 1-11, the abiding in the vine and stuff. But yeah, do counseling and working with a lot of the organizations and the groups there, lead our adult discipleship and our men's ministry, and write a lot of our Bible studies.
Hey guys, it's Brenna Carl, CEO and co-founder of The Mortgage Shop. When I'm not spending my time searching for the best pizza in town, working out because of pizza, or fighting sharks as Kale likes to say, I spend my time educating clients on the best investment products that will help them build generational wealth and making sure their loan process is as smooth as warm butter on a piece of toast. Call us today to get started with your investment journey at 800-816-7982 or to talk more about pizza. Talk to you soon.
And I just gave up leading the safety team. I'm a firearms instructor as well. I just gave that. Well, I had to take some things off my plate, so I recruited another person to take over that. Again, don't do too many irons in the fire. Sometimes it's problematic, though. My brain loves lots of irons in the fires. I feel oftentimes I'm running around like those people juggling plates on the poles. I kind of live that life of just constantly trying to keep everything up. And sometimes I have to go, let me just take this plate off and do that.
But that's a good segue then right there. So with obviously all the ministries and everything that you said you've got going on, I know that I've been recently starting to follow you on the social media and everything and see that you're putting out some stuff in regards to your fitness journey now. I know your son that I met is heavily into fitness as well. So why don't you just talk about that a little bit and what's the motivation behind that, and how does, if faith plays into that as well?
Yeah. So being in ministry, a lot of times you're very sedentary in what you do. plus with a lot of the other work I've done let's just say I got out of an active lifestyle. I started getting very sedentary and the weight started coming on to me. So I don't know how much I weighed at my heaviest because once I got to about 260 pounds, I refused to step on a scale to keep looking at it. But I know it went significantly above that. But I started suffering from sleep apnea, panic attacks, because waking up, not able to breathe and things like that. I was doing sales at that point. So I was driving all around the Southeast and my body just couldn't keep up with it. I was literally falling asleep even while I was driving just because I just wasn't sleeping and resting well. So I started trying to do some transition in work and I was still doing this training company that I'm trying to get my mom to retire from. But so I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, getting ready to do a conference and I was in the hotel room that night and I realized that with sleep apnea going on, with my blood pressure, my blood pressure on a regular basis was 200 over 120 was actually a good day for me on my blood pressure. So I was a living, walking stroke ready to. But that's what I was just living with just because I wasn't doing anything to fix it. My doctor, who's a great doctor down in Hilton Head when we lived down that area, was like, Patrick, you're going to die soon if you don't fix this. But I was literally sitting in the hotel room that night and had the training I was doing the next day. And I was like, I literally could die in my sleep tonight. That was my kind of wake up moment. And it hit me because this was about 4 years ago. I was like, I won't be able to watch my daughters walk down the aisle. I won't be able to see my grandkids. I'll leave my wife basically destitute. And so I started thinking through all of this. Simon Sinek has a couple good books and stuff called Start With Your Why or Know Your Why. And that was my why at that moment. I literally was weeping in a hotel room. And I'm like, I need to fix this. I need to change something. And I didn't know what I needed to do at that point, but I knew that what I was doing was not the right path. It was leading me down through a path of destruction and death. And I stumbled upon intermittent fasting. This was just before COVID. So I stumbled upon intermittent fasting by accident and I liked it. My body responded well to it. Then I started focusing on, there's a book out there by Gary Keller called The One Thing, and it's a podcast too. I love that. And so I made my one thing. I got to get up and just walk a little bit every morning. And so I started building that into it. I try to do that still very regularly. I post about it sporadically, but I try to do it regularly when possible. And then just getting into eating right, exercising. And I talk about you can't out exercise a bad diet. So that's one of the first areas I start with people that are like, hey, I'm in bad shape too. How can you help me? Can you walk me through what you're doing? And so that's generally my people I work with are people who are suffering from their stupidity, just like I did. So I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing as I'm trying to come out of that. And so like when dealing with food, it's what you eat. So you talk about your macros and stuff like that. It's how much you eat, your calorie count, you're being in a caloric deficit for losing weight. And then it's when you eat, it's the intermittent fasting. You can eat the same amount of food and lose weight better by intermittent fasting because your body has time to digest and burn off some of the fat versus always having a food source there. And so those are some of the things with the eating that we look at. But then I started looking at and learning about your cardio levels, your cardio zones, and which ones do best for burning fat, which ones do best for strengthening your heart, and those elements. So I've started to try to become a student of health and fitness. My doctor that I was telling you about down in Hilton Head, he's done a good definition of fitness. And he talks about, I'm trying to pull up so I can actually read it to you. He says fitness is your capacity to perform physical tasks combined with certain areas like cardiovascular, muscle, bone strength, immune system, mental and social health and well-being. It's just the idea of fitness being well-rounded. It's not just a pigeonhole thing. It's mentally, it's physically. And then as I'm getting into my upper 40s now, one of the things I see a lot is the mobility issues. So many people, as they get older, their risk of falling goes up. Their quick twitch fibers in their muscles weaken. So when you see President Biden tripping over a sandbag at the graduation, those are quick fibers. Your fibers not working good, so your legs can't catch yourself up. And those are things when those falls like that happen, they can severely hurt us. I forget what the stats are, but it's 3 times more likely to die within the next 12 to 18 months if you take a significant fall. So as you get older, your mobility issues and your stretching become very significant as well. So I am nowhere near where I need to be, but it's been a wonderful journey where I've gotten through. My blood pressure's down almost to a normal area. Snoring has disappeared for the most part. Sleep apnea is gone. I'm able to get up and move and walk and enjoy life and enjoy my my kids and hopefully my grandkids in the future coming up. And so that was the start for me. But the scripture talks about just being a good steward, and your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit, and that's usually a spiritual talk. Paul tells Timothy that fitness does matter some, but you need to focus on the spiritual. But the reality is, if you're not physically fit, you're no good for anything. If you don't be good stewards of your body, it's going to limit what you can do with your faith, with your family. It can limit what you do in your work you're going to do, and so forth. So reality is, even though it's the physical part of it, fitness really should be hand in hand almost with faith, because without your physical fitness, it's going to severely limit anything else you can do, or your time from how much time you have to do it. And so that's become an important thing for me too.
Yeah, both of those things, faith and fitness, require discipline, self-denial. They require habits, group encouragement. These are all things that's so true. And that's LKL's idea behind this podcast, was being well-rounded and not being one or the other.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I taught my kids growing up about discipline, and you don't need discipline in areas that you're good at or you enjoy doing, because you're just going to do them. You need discipline in areas that are important, but you're not naturally going to want to do those.
Right.
So discipline in your faith, discipline in your fitness, discipline in your finances, that delayed gratification of not just spending everything and thinking ahead and planning out stuff is so vitally important. So that discipline and being intentional just goes across the board on all of it. So you're absolutely right. And having those accountability. Matter of fact, the shirt underneath my shirt right now, I think it's a one thing shirt, but it says, choose your habits, choose your life.
Right.
And so it's one of those things that is, the more you put into it and you make actions into habits, and then your habits will determine your life.
Right. Yeah. And not only that, but it's the mental clarity that physical fitness provides as well, which of course is going to help you in all these other areas, right? Your faith and your fitness and everything else, and the stress reduction, and like I said, your blood pressure and all these things. And that's one of the big reasons I'm such an advocate for physical fitness. Is not just for the physical aspect of it. I love the physical aspect of it. I think it's extremely important. Just like you said, just these simple, not necessarily super intense regimen that you're doing right now, even that has eliminated or mitigated a lot of these physical challenges that you had previously. So just getting moving, getting active, and being consistent and disciplined about that can have so many positive impacts physically on your life, which is going to overflow into these other things. And I know for me, and I know it's the same for many other different types of physical activities, the weightlifting is my thing. I know that was your son's thing, but it's more a mindset thing than a physical thing.
Yeah.
The same weight can feel light or heavy depending on the day and where my head's at. It's amazing. It's like it was just happened this week. Like I was going to do, it was a max out on a certain thing, but I had just literally done it the week before without a problem. And then I went to do it this week, and my head wasn't super clear, and I went into it and I struggled and I barely got it. And I was like, gosh, that's the way it is. If your head is not in it, it's the physical thing is going to follow as well. So they go hand in hand so much, and why it's super important. And I was listening to another podcast, I think it was a few weeks ago, but they were talking about some of the common myths out there are that as you get older, your metabolism starts to slow. And that's why as you get older, you tend to gain weight and that type of thing. Same thing with testosterone levels. And this person, it was a doctor, was basically saying that's a bunch of crap. They were saying, actually, it's your metabolism basically goes in a few cycles, basically, or a few segments, something like that. It's from the time you're born until, I'm not going to get these exact age ranges right, but it was like something along the lines of from the time you're born until 20 years old, your metabolism is the same. And then from 20 until 70 or 80, your metabolism is the same. And then 80 beyond, your metabolism is the same. So it starts out really high, but then from 20 to whatever it was, 60 or 70, your metabolism is not declining. So many people think like your metabolism is exactly the same as it was for a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old. And similar thing with testosterone levels. And so they were just saying that to dispel these things, because I think those things are thrown out there a lot as excuses, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm in my 40s, right? That means I can't be fit for some reason. for some reason, that means you can't be fit. And I saw a video that I shared in our group yesterday, I think it was, about this 90-year-old bodybuilder. He's 90 years old. And of course, he's not like huge but for 90 years old, the guy he has no issues with mobility, like you were talking about. He's in the gym. I think he was like 3 or 4 days a week for 2 hours at a time was his routine. Of course, he's not pumping. He's not throwing up huge weights and that type of thing. What he talked about was that he used to be a big bodybuilder, and that was his thing when he was younger. Now that he's older, it changes, right? He adapts to what his body needs at that point, which is more so mobility and consistency. And so anyway, all of that just to say, doing something physically active is so important and can have so many benefits beyond just the physical portion of it. It gets into the mental aspect of it. It gets into all these different areas of your life, stress reduction, health in general. It's just why it's so important. And we have to do the hard things.
Yep.
That's that. At the end of the day, that's it. We have to do the hard things or the things that we don't want to do if we want to be successful in those areas.
Yeah, I agree. And because like you talking about your testosterone and your metabolism, there may be some element that plays affecting on things. But the reality is what I've seen for me and others that I've been working with too, it's more of a result of your lifestyle.
Right.
How active are you? What are you eating? What are you putting in your body? Both with finances and with health. There's a saying I heard years ago, but it's if your upkeep exceeds your income, if your income, let me get to it. If your outgo exceeds your income, then your upkeep will be your downfall. So if what goes out is less than what comes in, then you're trying to maintain that is going to be your downfall. And it's true with fitness. If we're eating more than what we should be or eating the wrong stuff, that's going to affect things. Our finances is going to affect things if we're spending more than we're making. And so our habits, our lifestyle is, I'm not going to say the only factor, but I will say it's the biggest factor and it's the factor that we can control.
Right.
So that's where it's important that we work on and look at.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
Right? So listen, I know we're getting towards the end here, but I did want to touch on the financial aspect. And I know you got some new projects or new paths that you're going down. We touched on it in your bio in terms of getting your contractor's license and getting into the short-term rental space and building, that type of thing. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what's behind that and what's the plan, what's the motivation behind that?
Yeah. So the motivation is not being broke. That's been a lot of our life growing up. And it's interesting. I see trends pretty well, and I've seen things and investments and stuff. And I've always had friends who did things and was very successful. And I always loved watching them be successful. But it's like, hey, can I get into some of this myself? And we got plugged in with a few of our friends in the Hilton Head area up in the Smoky Mountains. And so we have a couple pieces of property. We're looking at doing some builds up there, some short-term rentals that they're involved with too. A lot about that market up there in Sevierville and Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. But a couple years ago, and most of these guys were in like my small group, my men's group when we lived down in the Bluffton, Hilton Head area. And a couple years ago, my wife and I were out walking and I get a phone call from the guys and they're like, hey, you need to come up here today. I'm like, I'm working. He goes, no, let me tell you who's all here. All my guys were up there. And they're like, you need to come up here. I'm like, okay. So my wife said, get up there. You haven't seen them in a while. And then, so that night over dinner, as we were talking, they were like, we need you to get your builder's license because that is one of the issues that we're facing up there, and is that you don't have a lot of good builders. You don't have a lot of builders who are doing stuff that's a bottleneck of stuff. I've been working on that, and there's an element of finance, there's an element of tests. I'm a really good test taker, so I hardest test I ever took, I breezed through it and got 96% on it. But so we're working on finalizing everything so we can get the general contractor's license, the builder's license approved, hopefully here in September. And because once we do that, there's going to be some things down the pipeline, a number of builds happening there, both for them as well as for some of the land that we own, that my son and I own, and things we're doing there too. But yeah, and the big thing is years ago, my wife and I decided to follow Dave Ramsey, decided to get debt free, live on a cash basis. So for all of our personal stuff, that's pretty much everything we do with a rare exception, which has been good when you're not making a lot of money. You don't have a lot of overhead of bills you got to pay or debts you got to pay off. So that's been helpful. And my wife is amazing. She can squeeze a turnip and get all this stuff out of it. So she's been able to provide for taking care of food and around the house on sometimes less. And it's almost like the widow that Elijah dealt with, just had all the oil just kept pouring out. And my wife's amazing with that. But I love entrepreneurship. I love businesses. I oftentimes trade off the income for the impact. But we're at a stage right now with a couple of my kids gotten married and a little bit more time now that my mom's getting ready to retire. that I can refocus on some of the passions I have, which includes real estate, which includes coaching and doing some of that more. And yes, that's the process. So we own one piece of land, and we got some other stuff, some other deals we're trying to get closed on up there in the Sevierville, Pigeon Forge area now. The hope it will be by September, October, we're starting to build a few cabins too. And yeah, and which obviously there's great possibilities in that. But one of the things I'm also been working on with our kids is the aspect is you don't need a lot to have contentment. Now, it's okay to have a lot. We talked about that earlier, but to whom much is given, much is required. So you got to make sure of that. And then also there's an importance as you're building finances up, whatever the opportunities are, you got to be faithful in a little bit if you ever want to have a lot. And so we try to be faithful in a little bit throughout the time we've been doing stuff. And we're watching doors open up, connections with people, opportunities. I tried not to covet opportunities as over the years. Hey, that's a great idea. If someone needs to do that, then watch people do it. I'm like, man, I thought about that 5 years ago type thing. And try not to let those things overshadow some of the other stuff. But while we're working towards hopefully good stuff, and thankfully for my wife, she puts up with a lot of my risk taking and thinking through stuff. She's a very safe person, but she's basically said, hey, keep a roof over her head, keep food on our table, and go do it. I believe in you, which is really important if you have a wife and a teammate like that who believes in you and who's willing to go through the tough times as you're getting there, because not everything works out easily the first time or second time or third time or fourth time, but having that person who just believes in you in that process. And so we're looking at stuff and we're like, okay, unless something significant happens, we got some good things we're within months of seeing some things come to fruition. And a lot of people are wondering now about, okay, what's the rental market like these days, the short-term rental market, inflation and all these other things. And I heard you say earlier, just before we came on, and I agree with you completely, if you do it right, you're in good shape. I was having a conversation with one of our men last night after our men's group Bible study. And he literally asked the same questions like, are you nervous about it? I'm like, no, because the way we're planning on stuff and how we're getting into it, it leaves us a lot of options. There's whether you're doing short-term rentals, midterm rentals, if you follow things like Bigger Pockets or whatever else, there's lots of great opportunities. I'm a believer nowadays that there is no reason that people need to struggle. There's so many opportunities available, whether it's in side hustles, businesses, there's so many different ways that you can add a little extra income or make some good decisions, that it's the market, the financial side of things is wide open for people who have a little bit of vision, have a little bit of go-get-itiveness, and are willing to go out and try it and do it. But one of the things I also tell guys a lot of times, like one of the guys last night, he was like, he's looking at buying a business. And he goes, I have the money in my retirement. I'm like, dude, don't touch that. Don't touch the security you have. Don't get a second mortgage on your house and put your personal residence at risk. This is my personal opinion here. Your wife will love it more if you take your risk, but don't put her at risk. And so just know that, be wise in what you're doing and how you're doing it. And there's lots of opportunities out there. And that's one of the things I love doing. I have 5 guys I'm working with right now, and they're all looking at side hustles and how do we do that? And so I love it when they come to my office and we can sit down and look at LoopNet or whatever else and just add opportunities and help them brainstorm or try to figure out how to, if they're already doing entrepreneurship, how to readjust what they're doing to get a better clientele or to work on profit margins and stuff like that. So a lot of the books I read is all about entrepreneurship and sales and a lot of the business side of things, because for a lot of the men I work with, that's a big issue. And the finances of things is important. Because there's a guy in our church who's pushing retirement age and just told us the other day, he goes, I can't retire. There's no way I'm going to be retired anytime soon because we didn't make good decisions early on. And how do we do that? And the reality is, I think there's always a way out if we just look at options and take it. And so that's one of the things I enjoy doing, is helping people look at those options as well.
Yeah. No, love it. And yeah, like you mentioned, and Wes and I were chatting about offline before we started here, is whether it's short-term rentals or anything, buying right is one of the most important things you can do. And especially in the market that we've been in over the past several years, where things have just been going up and up. Even, okay, there's been some little dips along the way, but it's been a very prosperous several years.
Yeah.
And it can be dangerous because it gives you that false sense of security that this is how things are. And so it makes it a lot easier to perhaps bend your criteria or make the numbers work. And especially with social media and podcasts and books and everything, there's a lot of hype around a lot of different things, and it makes you want to get into that. And you hear these success stories and you get caught up in the fervor of it, more or less, and you end up overpaying. And that's where the struggle comes in.
All FOMO.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Or just setting up a bad structure that's going to come back and bite you. Even if your payments or your amount's good, the terms can be horrible. And so, just not thinking. Social media is one of the most dangerous things we have out there, because always what people want you to see, and you don't see reality.
Right.
And even though I love some of our podcasts like Bigger Pockets and some of these other things, I'm an avid follower of Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki. I live in the world between debt's evil and debt's great type thing. But I think you always have to have discernment and wisdom and do it well at almost anything. Even a dog spa can be fantastic for people. And if it's done properly and well. And so you're still doing that, Wesley, over in Fayetteville area, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just being smart, being prudent, like you said, not overextending yourself and putting yourself at undue risk, which is certainly important, especially if you have a family and all that stuff. And then, buying right, managing right, of course, whatever type of business it is, that's going to be your second most important thing. And, but beyond that, it's the people, I think, or a lot of the doom and gloom that's out there is coming from, I'm not going to get into part of it because I think there's some sinister aspects of it. That's for sure. But I think a lot of it too is that people who got in a bad situation and now they're experiencing that, and they're newer to it. And so now it becomes the sky is falling and rumors spread, that type of stuff spreads like wildfire. Bad news spreads quick.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of that stuff going on out there. From what I see, I don't necessarily see things in that perspective, but I think there's a lot of people that got themselves into a bad situation over these past few years.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the reality is, if you're talking about getting into an investment, I forget who said this years ago, but you make your money when you buy, not when you sell. You've got to buy it. And a lot of times people jump in because they want that short-term rental house that they didn't pay for. They didn't pay the right amount to make it cash flow properly. So you've got to look at those numbers. You got to know those. And like I tell my son all the time, I say, listen, this is a business. It's no emotion. You can't go into a short-term rental or any type of real estate, or even if you do stocks and dividends and stuff like that, you can't go into it with emotions. You got to go into it with, look at the numbers. It's either works or it doesn't. And if it's not a clear cut, just walk away. People have that fear of missing out, like Wesley just mentioned, that FOMO. And the reality is you get that and it can get you in trouble. That's the same thing if you are looking at online trainings or some of these people that sell their courses and stuff online. They put fear in you. Oh, we only want to work with the people who can make the decision. You know what? They're trying to get you not to be wise or discerning as well. Yeah, you need to be able to make decisions well, but you need to only do that when it's the correct decision. And sometimes salespeople or some of these online folks will push you to make a decision, and it's not the best decision for you. And they don't want you to sit back and think about it. Car salesmen do the same thing. They're like, hey, just sign this, look at this. And the reality is, it's always okay to step back and say, wait. What I have found for me is the times I've said wait and something didn't work out, it was a good thing that I wasn't involved in it. So it's always good to push back, say wait, be wise know what you're talking about or what you're looking at, and then make a decision confidently when it's the right time and right decision. There's always going to be more deals. It's just, you just got to look at them. But if you get into the wrong deal, it can be devastating for both physically, financially, mentally. You can give up on a great path because you're like, oh, I had a bad experience. And those are the things you got to be careful of as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And this real quick example on it is, I talked about it before on some of these previous episodes, and is that one of my challenges this year has been that things have been going slower in one aspect in terms of acquisitions. Like over the past couple of years, I moved very quickly, acquired a lot. And then it's been almost a year since I closed on the last one, which is a long time for me. And it's been a real struggle throughout this year because even though I'm doing a lot of other things that have been moving fast, just in that particular aspect, it's been discouraging and frustrating for me throughout this year. And so I've told Wesley, I do this, I do my best to submit this to prayer and to God's will. And there was one deal that just a couple of weeks ago, I submitted an offer on. I really wanted it. We got really close in the negotiations, but they weren't willing to budge anymore. And it was very tempting to cross that line and say, if I just change this, the numbers make sense, right? And I had to walk away, and it was discouraging. Again, I was like, man, okay, there's another one. All right, God, close the door, open another one when the right one comes. And like I said, that was about 2 weeks ago. Just yesterday, a few days ago, I saw these 2 properties come on the market, and I told my realtor, hey, this is in the Smokies again. I want to submit an offer. My fault. I hadn't updated my proof of funds or my pre-approval letter. Well, you're going to get me an updated pre-approval letter before I can submit the offer. This is like a Friday night. And so I couldn't get the updated one until Monday. Over the weekend, one of them went under contract. And I was just like, gosh, what the heck? Stupid you, Kale. And so Monday came and I was like, all right, let's submit an offer on the other one. And it was the same seller. And I was like, look, just let them know that I'm interested in both. If they want to accept a backup offer or something happens, I'm interested in both. And they rejected my offer. Like they weren't even going to counter. They just rejected it outright and said, we want to wait for a better offer. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next one. The next morning, I get a text from the realtor. Hey, that first one already fell out of contract. The seller likes that you want both. They want to negotiate.
Nice.
The next day, we're under contract on both. So hopefully it works out. This is in the very beginning. We're going to do inspections and whatever. But if it does happen, I think they're going to be good deals. But I bring that up just because it was like one letdown after another and just like, goodness gracious. Okay. All right, God, if it's going to work, if it's the right deal, make it happen. If it's not, don't let it go.
And that's the key right there is the whole process. You kept saying, all right, God, all right, God, all right, God. And I think that's healthy. That's very healthy.
Right.
Yeah, because we just, I'm gonna say, lost a deal. We walked away from a deal, just kind of like you were looking at too, on a piece of land I could build 7 cabins on up there. And it was, everything seemed to be going good until the offer was submitted. And they were like, we don't like this anymore. And we're like, okay, this is what works for us. We got some flexibility in some areas. If you don't like that, we'll walk away. And still has a great potential, but it doesn't have the, it's not just the end result for me. Hey, I know there's $2.5 million of potential equity here, but it needs to work right at every step. And those are the things that I'm like, okay, I'm not willing to risk step 3 because step 5 looks really good. And because that's where if things fall apart, step 3, we're in trouble. And so so that's where, again, bathing everything on the foundation of faith, trusting in God and what he's doing, but there's always going to be deals out there. And then in a handful of years, when Smokies might not be the best place to be building, there'll be another area. Though with all this happening up there, there's 10, 15 more years of easy growth up in the Smokies, it looks like, based on some of the other things that are happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, just to wrap it all up. And so just getting a closing question is, what are 3 actionable or practical tips based on anything that we talked about that you could leave our audience with?
Okay, so let me go through 3. First one is be intentional. That's always the thing. Be intentional. When you have something, you got to be intentional about that. Secondly is, I would say, look big picture, look long-term. It's the steps you take now need to be leading somewhere. So it's always better to look out to where you want to go. So have a kind of have a vision or a plan for where you're wanting to go. And then third, hug your kids and your wife daily. They're the ones that matter the most on your practical stuff, and never lose the core family in the process. Your finances, pay attention to do your fitness and your finances, but it's those that close. It's your wife, it's your husband, it's your kids. Those are ones that matter the most. When you go to bed at night, or even better, when you die, they're the ones who are going to miss you and be talking about you.
Bam. Mic drop right there. All right. So Patrick, then what's the best way for our audience to be able to reach out to you if they want to learn more about your ministries, your coaching, any of these things, or follow you? What's the best way?
So pretty soon, my website, patricklengel.com, will be up and running. Always the best place. You can catch me on social media, but everything will be linked there. My personal telephone number will be there. I tried to do, hey, broad, let's internet everything out. The reality is I like personal people. If anybody has questions about coaching or about ministry or just need some encouragement or ask questions about stuff, you can find my contact information on patricklengel.com. And you can literally just give me a call to my office number, and I'll be the one who answers it most likely, unless I'm out doing stuff. So that one will have all the links to the ministry and the other things I'm involved with as well.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much, Patrick. A wonderful interview. And thank you guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Kel. Thank you, Wesley.